sure how to add a footnote to an audiobook, so I thought I would simply tell you. Here in part 3, John Gilbert reveals much of his emotional nature and temperament. He is a mercurial person and reacts with highs and lows to any situation, including being in love. This attitude would foreshadow his conduct in his later life when he veered from being perhaps the most popular American film star to receiving bad reviews for his voice in sound films. Of course, we already know that was a bum rap.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Gilbert, and welcome to Part 3 of my life. Last time we reviewed my arrival at the Innsville studio near Santa Monica, where I got my first movie job as an extra. In this part, I learn many lessons and have my first romance. I hope you will enjoy it. My conviction is that dreams are things which poets write about and fools believe in. They have no place in the lives of ordinary men. My only knowledge of transportation to the studio was the bus from Santa Monica. This vehicle I found already half filled when I arrived, and within a few minutes, latecomers occupied the remaining empty seats, and we started off. I was paid not the slightest attention. Afterwards, I discovered why. There were 3 separate and distinct factions at Innsville. One was made up of the hams, that is, the actors who played parts. Even the bitmen or small part artists came under that category, and they rarely mingled or conversed with the lesser lights. The least distinguished group employed in this strange community was called the bourgeois. The word must have been derived from the French bourgeois, which Webster defines as common people lacking in distinction or refinement. The bourgeois constituted the background of scenes, the mob, the atmosphere, so-called. They were just as clannish as the hams, and did not attempt to mingle with their superiors. Wherefore, the reason for my exclusion from the chatter about me. I had already been labeled. I was bourgeois. Arriving at the studio, I was the last to leave the bus. The old gate man ignored me as I passed. Innsville was now the spirit of activity. People in various costumes ran about the place like ants. Full-breech Indians, blue-uniformed soldiers of the 1860 period, plainsmen, Irish peasants and Spanish troubadours, Chinese coolies and Hindu priests. The Orient and the Occident converged here in Santa Monica on an April morning under a California sun. Suddenly, a group of horsemen dashed down a hill and came to a rearing halt before the main office. Now, I discovered the 3rd division in this hierarchy. The aristocrats, the mighty ones, the cowboys, all hail. Their arrival seemed to electrify the air, and with oaths and shouts they took command. Come on, you hams, on the set, bourgeois, get your horses, dudes. All was confusion. Then everyone disappeared. Some vanished into doorways which led to stages. Others ran to the horse corral or rushed off to outlying sets in the hills. The streets became desolate. An occasional boom of surf and the squawk of seabirds interrupted the stillness. Innsville had gone to work. Tuck, tuck, tuck. A typewriter was being played inside the main office. From the Café de Yellow came a voice singing, "We were sailing along on Moonlight Bay," followed the voice. Yellow was wiping his lunch counter with a damp cloth. "Pardon me, you sell Coca-Cola?" My interruption was rude, but Yellow was a gent. "Sure." He dropped his cloth and fished in an icebox for a bottle. I wriggled to the top of a high stool before the counter. "Not working today?" I explained that I had just arrived. Yellow gave me a passing inspection and went back to his damp cloth. It's not a bad joint. Yellow was an Italian. He had served 2 stretches for burglary, one in Sing Sing, the other in San Quentin. No one at Innsville ever discovered his Sir or Christian names. Yellow he was, but his nom de plume was no indication of the quality of his backbone. I once saw him in action. Oh, boy. After introductions, I was told to follow the crowd. Permit me to use one phrase to describe the boys in that room. They were grand. Roy Colson took me in charge and assigned me to my makeup shelf and clothes closet. Todd Burns taught me to apply Bowl Armenia to my legs and torso. Gil Pratt instructed me as to the proper angle of eagle feathers in a redskin's mane. And Howard North showed me the difference between stage and movie facial makeup. I had the good sense to say little and listen much, and they were charming. Then I followed the crowd. Our morning's work consisted of riding pinto ponies bareback around a camera in a circle, giving vent to occasional war whoops and firing rusty old muskets at imaginary blue soldiers. In the afternoon, we donned blue uniforms, applied false mustaches and beards to our faces, and stood behind a stockade giving vent to occasional shouts and firing the same rusty old muskets at imaginary Indians. It was an amazing game. At sundown, we were dismissed. My body was sore from unaccustomed exercise, and I could not face the ride to the dressing rooms with the rest of the bourgeois. I started limping down the hill, leading my pony. Roy Coulson returned from the group ahead, joined me, and asked, "Tired?" I grinned and nodded. "Buck up. We work tonight." I was aghast. "No." "Yea, with Stanford in Sulphur Canyon." I limped along in silence, and blood ran down one of my legs. Roy saw and laughed. "You'll harden up in a few days." I hoped he was right. "You like this after a while." Roy was bent on conversation. "It's better than a lot of jobs. I slung hash in Venice for 6 months before I landed here." I agreed that being bourgeois was better than serving bourgeois. Just give every bit you get the best you got, and maybe you'll get a part. And if the cowboys cuss you, don't cuss back. They're a lot of roughnecks. We arrived at the corral and tied our horses. Roy led the way toward the Café de Yellow. "Let's put on the nose bag before we change." We did. That night's work in Sulphur Canyon almost saw my career as a movie actor open and close in one day. Richmond Stanford was directing the scenes. He was Mr. S to his friends. He also played the lead in all his pictures. His acting was as bad as his direction, and his disposition was worse. Jim Tully scratched his character in his book, Jarnigan. The scenes to be shot were presumably laid at the bottom of a mine shaft. An explosion had taken place in the mine. Scenes of the anguished women and children, the families of the stricken miners at the entrance of the shaft, were to be intercut with shots of the tragedy taking place below. Jagged pieces of timber representing the debris resulting from the explosion were piled in a heap on the floor of Sulphur Canyon. 5 or 6 bourgeois were placed in different attitudes of death, here and there about the wreckage. I was one of the deceased. Kerosene was then poured indiscriminately about the set. The radium flares were lighted. We had no Klieg lights in those days. A torch was applied to the timber, and the cameras started grinding. Stanford had cautioned us that we were dead, and had added, "Don't any move." By that he meant no one should move. According to instruction, I lay as in death for several seconds. The hiss and crackle of flames was all about me. My feet began to feel warm. Then they began to feel hot. I opened one eye and discovered that my shoes were burning briskly. Then my pants burst into flame. Stanford bawled, "Lie still!" I yelled, "Nuts!" and leaped to the ground. Someone threw a blanket around me and smothered the flames. Stanford was livid. "You've killed the scene, you yellow rat." I weighed 110 pounds, so I started looking for a club. Todd Burns whispered, "Don't say a word." Through my half-baked brain, Todd's word made sense, and I said nothing. I find it gratifying to note that if Mr. Stanford is still in motion pictures, his position is so remote that I have quite lost track of him. I barely made my bed that night. I had spent my first day before the camera. If genius was burning, the flame was far removed from me. Then, Innsville got me. The itinerary of the bourgeois from town to camp was as follows. A streetcar from Santa Monica to the Long Wharf, the longest in the world. A change there to Tallyho's, drawn by double teams of mules. A 4-mile spin over a king's highway, past palisades and canyons and purple-heathered slopes, and a great, friendly Pacific, which roared each early morning a greeting. When the last bend in the road hid the first glimpse of Inceville, 20 voices in unison called, "Yoo-hoo-hoo-hoo!" And as the camp came into view, an echo, rich but trembling, "Yoo-hoo-hoo!" The old gateman had answered. My crusty old gateman who loved only the bourgeois. Valleys filled with blossoming sage and poppies and yucca, brooks shouting songs as they raced from mountain top to sea, a young world mad with ecstatic life, a $15 a week world, but swell. Watch the actors as they play their scenes. Learn something. Why won't they give me a part? Months of that, and then Effie. On the night of the 4th of July, the beach from Santa Monica to Venice was a blaze of fireworks. I was alone in my room and lonesome. I didn't go about much at night, but the fireworks and the voices of people passing my window made me long for companionship. With the few dollars I had saved stuffed in my pocket, I hopped a jitney bus for Venice. The pier was jammed. Still, I felt alone. I swung in with the mob and drifted along the midway. From the open screened doors of each cabaret came the sounds of music and laughter and the tinkling of ice against glass. As I passed the old ship cafe, I heard my name called. Langdon Gillette with 2 girls was standing in the entrance, waiting to be seated. Would I join them and make a foursome? You bet. You know Effie? Yes. Effie was of the bourgeois. And miss, I've forgotten her name. At last, a table, 4 glasses, a bottle of scotch. The usual self-consciousness displayed when strangers are thrown together. Little quips and sallies and light laughter. A clash of cymbals. A wail from a saxophone. Boom, boom. Everybody loves a baby. That's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, pretty baby. Let's dance. Effie led me to the floor. She hummed an accompaniment in my ear. I made no attempt at conversation. Effie was small and fresh and feminine. I was supremely happy. The music stopped. Thunderous applause. That was grand, wasn't it? I hope they won't quit. A silver dollar from somewhere clanged against a brass megaphone. Tick, tick, boom, boom. Here they go. Everybody loves a baby. That's why I'm in love with you. Effie looked at me and smiled. I grinned back. You're nice, she said. I held her closer. You're glorious. Effie's smile reminded me of 16 babies all in a row. I told her and she giggled. You're not as I expected. I was curious. What had she expected? You hardly speak to anyone at camp. I explained my timidity of people before knowing them. Secretly, I was flattered that she had noticed me at camp. You're not timid now, are you? Effie's eyes were eager with friendliness. My lips brushed her cheek. No, I'm not timid now. Something had happened to us. Sympathy of mood and desire. Strings had been played upon, and a chord struck. Boom, boom. Pretty baby of mine. Ah. Applause. That will be a all. Sighs of regret. Feet shuffling toward tables. Handkerchiefs dripping with perspiration from flushed faces. Body smells. And then the cool trickle of iced scotch and white rock. Beneath the tablecloth, I pressed Effie's hand, and then Johnny Weaver understands. Now, while life is raw and new, drink it straight, drink it deep, let the moonlight's lunacy tear away your cautions, be proud and mad and young and free, grasp a comet, kick at stars laughingly, fight, dare, arms a soft, breasts a white, magics in the April night. There was magic that night for Effie and for me, and magic filled the months that followed. Nestling at the feet of the Palisades, low on the Santa Monica beach, was Effie's cottage. A geranium-bordered path led from a tiny gate past whitewashed stones to the threshold. 3 little rooms, annexed from heaven. Pert cretones subdued the glare from the faceted sapphire sea. Grass mats cooled the floors for blue wicker furniture, and in the walls 2 bamboo oblongs framed Fujiyama, and an indignant, slant-eyed lady, her skirts blown high by a Nipponese wind. All of these, and Effie. Carefree days at Inceville played an obligato to love-filled nights. Long walks beneath a million stars, songs of the day in soft duet. A whirl about the nickel dance hall, laughter for the hysterical shrieks from women in the roller coaster, an occasional soiree at the ship, with understanding smiles each time the orchestra played Pretty Baby. Then home to poetry and low conversation and Effie. All this was ours. Effie had said, let's keep it secret, so no one knew. One night we quarreled, stupidly and foolishly, like children. I sulked for 2 days. Then we made it up. Reconciliation was so sweet. I was given my first bit to play in Hell's Hinges with William S. Hart. While the cameras were grinding, I glanced off and saw Effie looking at me. Her eyes seemed filled with criticism of my work. When the scene was finished, I rushed to her. Please don't stare at me when I'm working. Her lip trembled. Why, dear, I was proud of thee. I became petulant. But F, you make me nervous. Damn it, don't watch me. The assistant director called, Gilbert, front and center. I fled to the camera. Now came a close-up with Hart. My blood raced with excitement. All the bush were watched to see if I would fail. The camera started. Once more I felt Effie's eyes upon me. Then went to pieces. The scene was stopped, and Mr. Hart, with saintly patience, told me where I had gone wrong. I glared furiously at Effie and waved her away. She disappeared through the crowd. I played the scene to its end. Cliff Smith, the director, was warm in his praise. I did not see Effie that night, nor for a week thereafter. Then I became lonely. No, I was through with Effie. Solitude is sweet. But how much sweeter to have someone to whom you may say, solitude is sweet. The bare walls of my $2-a-week room howled at my vain efforts to find sleep. I tossed about for hours. I dressed and sought Effie. Her cottage was dark, but the bedroom window was open. I softly called her name. Rudely awakened, Effie inquired, "Who's there?" Jack. A light flashed. The front door opened, and I flew into her arms. Effie pressed her cheek to mine and stroked my head. "You poor, sweet baby," she said. "You poor, sweet baby." What is this madness which seizes men? This prowling instinct, this cancerous discontent, which causes them to flee from and abuse that which they love most? I became satiated. Effie's eyes grew large and troubled as she sensed my mood. She was older than I, and wiser, and saw the end approaching. She tried in every way to make things right, but every effort became an annoyance to me. I wanted to be free. For several days I stayed away. One morning on the way to Innsville, I sat beside her in the streetcar. I quietly and dispassionately explained that I was through. She smiled and looked away. When we arrived at Long Wharf, she pressed my hand very tightly and left. I did not join her in the tally-ho. That day the bourgeois were all sent to the top of a hill overlooking Innsville. The set was a replica of the German Kaiser's palace at Potsdam. The picture was civilization, Ince's grand gesture, our first great special production for the newly formed Triangle Corporation. Hundreds of mounted soldiers, of which I was one, lined the courtyard before the palace. And on the steps and balconies, civilians were grouped, eager to thunder, "Och" to the war god. Several long shots were taken, and the great scene was about to be filmed, when from one of the balconies came a wild, terror-filled scream. The sound was fraught with horror. Every face blanched, and every eye sought the source of the cry. An appalling sight was there. One wall of the palace was falling. Agonized shrieks, rearing horses, dust, curses, shouts, bedlam, hell. I rushed with others to lend assistance. Timbers and plaster were torn away to gain passage to the injured. A woman was dragged from the wreckage and borne in the arms of two men toward a waiting bus. The woman was Effie. Her eyes were closed and her face was chalken. 2 drops of blood were on her cheek. Something froze within me. "Effie!" I screamed and leaped forward. 2 cowboys shoved me back. The bus roared down the hill. "Effie!" I stood transfixed. A cowboy shouted, "You didn't help, you fool!" My limbs were rigid. Roy Coulson flew by. "Come on! Get him out!" I could not move. The horror of the calamity was everywhere. No attempt was made to work. In our dressing room, each witness described what he had seen. As we climbed into the tally-ho, a bus drove through the gate. We plied the driver with questions. He switched off his engine, unrolled his greasy gloves, flipped a cigarette, then said, "Effie Stewart died on the way to the hospital." The silence which followed seemed an eternity. I wish I had not lived beyond that moment. The tally-ho slowly left the studio. That night, my naked walls receded and I sat afraid. I fled to the street. The noises drove me mad. I roamed the darkness, past the hospital where I knew Effie lay. Effie! I was drawn to her cottage and stood, dry-eyed, gazing at the little house, ready now for a new tenant. I had expressed a desire to be free. I fell, sobbing, upon the sand. I did not go to Effie's funeral. The bourgeois took up a collection for flowers. No one offered me sympathy. I went to work. Cliff Smith came to my dressing room with some old clothes under his arm. "Make up for a test, kid. I think you can play Hart's brother in our next picture." A part after a year of bourgeois. I threw the grease paint on my face. Oh, God, let me make good. A part, a part. Thank you for watching part 3 of my life. Please join me for part 4, where my years as a bit actor seem to be expanding into feature roles. Or are they?